Hi, my name's Stewart Lynch, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can create a new reusable custom picker view in SwiftUI, different from what Xcode has to offer. I'll demo it for you right after this introduction, and as it's a long video, I have chapter links in the description below. After the demo, we'll design a custom picker view that will allow for the filtering of items. We'll create our own reusable custom picker text field, and I'll also show you how to allow users to add a list of items for picking. The solution supports multiple pickers, each with a different selection array on any view. If this is something you want to learn, then keep watching. So this is what we're going to be building. This view has two custom pickers on it. When I tap on the first one, it presents me with a list of food. As I type in the filter field, the list is filtered and collapsed. Tapping on an item will place it in your text field. This field also has an add button, so if you type in an entry that does not exist, you can add it to your list. And the next time you tap on the picker view, the new item is available for selection. This is an optional feature. In the second example, when we tap on the field, we're presented with a list of countries that could be filtered as well. But notice that this one doesn't have an add button. That's your choice. The solution is built so that it looks equally good in light or dark mode. There's a starter project for this video, and it can be downloaded from the link in the description below. The project is built using Xcode 12, so at the time of this video it's still in beta. But it is the future, so I decided to go with it. However, none of the code in the actual reusable custom picker files rely on iOS 14, so you could use them in an Xcode 11 project once complete. The content view is pretty simple. It has a background of a color specified in my assets folder, and the view itself is a VStack containing two text fields and an image. It will be our job to convert these text fields into our custom pickers, as we saw in the demo. The country files folder is just there to help us with the second country's text field, and I'll go through that later in this video. To start, let's create our custom picker view file first. This is what it's going to look like when we're finished. The picker presents a list of options inside a view that has a filter field that when you type will filter the list and reduce the height of the list to show only items that match the filter. I also want the custom picker view to have a title bar with a leading cancel button, and I want that to appear over the current view with the current view disabled and dimmed or obscured. So let's begin this process by creating a new SwiftUI file called CustomPickerView. Note that I'm going to be designing on the smallest screen, the iPhone SE, so I want to make sure that it scales well. My list items are going to be coming from the content view, so we'll need to create a variable called items that will be an array of strings. For our preview, let's create some sample data so that we can see what our screen will look like as we build it out. We can do this by creating a static variable that contains an array of strings. I'll also sort these strings so that our list will appear alphabetically. We can fix our preview now by adding in our items with the sample data. Now, in order to have that dim background when this view is presented, I'll embed the content in a Z-stack, and I'll add a low opacity black color for the background. And then on the Z-stack, we can extend it to all edges, ignoring the safe area. Just to recap then, this view, our picker, will be presented over our content view. So this low opacity color view will cover it, and then our picker view, which we will now design, will replace the text view, which will be on top. We can use a VStack to create our picker view, and let's start by creating the header bar with our leading cancel button. I'm going to set the alignment to leading and a spacing of 5. The first row will be an H stack containing a button, and we'll complete the action later. The title will be cancel. I'll set the padding to be 10 all around, and I'll add a spacer to push it to the left of the H stack. Next, I'll set the background of the entire H-stack to be a dark gray color and the foreground or text color to be white. Following this will be a text field that will have to be bound to some state string variable. So at the top of our struct, let's create one called filter string. Now we can add a text field with a placeholder of filter by entering text, and it will be bound to that variable we just created. I'm also going to change the style to rounded border text field style, and also add some padding. Next up will be our list showing our items. We can use a for each loop on our items array using self as the ID. For each row, we'll use our button that will have our item as the text, and an action that when tapped will select the item and dismiss our view. And we'll come back to that action in just a minute. Now, before I work on the filter and the action for this button, let's clean up the UI a bit. I want to set the background color of the V-stack to be the secondary system background color. And I also want to give it a corner radius of 10. I want to set the maximum width to be 400 with some horizontal padding. For the height, I want the frame height to be flexible in that when I filter, if the number of items are reduced, the frame height will reduce as well. And I also want there to be a maximum height. So I'm going to create by creating a state variable for this with an initial height of 400, and it has to be a CG float. And now that we have the frame height, we can assign it to the VStack's frame height. And finally, I'll embed this VStack inside another one, and I'll add a spacer to push the view up to the top of the screen. And I'll add a top padding of 20 just to bring it down a little bit. Next, we'll work on the filtering and button actions. In order to filter the list, we need to be able to take our original array of items and filter it based on text entered in our filter text field. Our items array is immutable, so we can't modify it, and nor do we want to. So I'll create a new array called filtered items that will be initialized as an empty array of strings. So at the top of the struct, create that state variable that will represent this new array. It will be an array of strings, but I'll start by making it empty when initialized. And now when our ZStack appears, we can set this item to be identical to our original items array. So after the edges ignoring safe area, we can create our onAppear block, and it's here where we set our filtered items array to be our items array. What we need to do now is to filter our filtered items array based on what is entered into the text field. If the text field is empty, we'll revert back to the original array of items. In order to do this, we have to create a custom binding instead of binding our text field to the filter string as we've done already. To do this, just before the ZStack, we create a filter binding. Now, a binding requires a get and a set. The getter just returns whatever is going to be in our filter string. The setter will first set the filter string to whatever is entered, and here we can simply use $0 to represent that text. This is what a binding is. But by creating our binding this way, we can do more when we set our value. We can check to see if filter string is not empty. And if it's not, we can now filter our array by checking the lowercase version of each element and see if it contains what the lowercase version of whatever we are typing. If our entry is an empty string, then we set it to the original items array. Now, since we've defined this before our view is returned, we must enter return before our ZStack. in our text field now, our binding is no longer the filter string, but rather the filter binding, and we don't need to use the $sign for this. And finally, we'll change our list to display the filtered items instead of the items. Well, we can test this in preview mode and find that our list is filtering based on what we type. What we want to do is to adjust the size of the VStack based on the number of rows. Well, we have a frame height to set that up. But before we do that, I want to guide my users a bit by adding in another text view above the text field. So beneath the header, I'll just add some text that will tell the user what to do, and I'll set the font to caption with some horizontal padding. Now, I was able to determine that each of our rows is 45 pixels high, so I'm going to create a function that will calculate the height based on the number of rows we have in our filtered items array. So I'll create a file private function called setHeight. Now I want the maximum height of our frame to be 400 if we have more than 5 rows. Else, if the count is 0, I want to be able to still display the filter field, so I'm going to set that height to be 130. Else, we can multiply the number of rows by 45 and add on that initial 130, and this needs to be a CG float. And finally, I want to animate this, so we'll enclose this within an animation block. Now I'm going to call this function in 2 places. Once when the view appears here, and also whenever the filter changes in our set for the filter binding. I noticed after doing the video for this recording that I made a mistake where I placed the setHeight function. It shouldn't be here. It should be at the end. So make sure you fix your code. The completed project on my GitHub page is correct. And fortunately for me, the demos that I did didn't matter. But it is in the wrong place. So let's test this in preview, and you'll see that it's working nicely based on the entries I make. There are 2 more things that we need to add before we can fully test the first stage of this app. We need to complete the action on the list button when someone taps on an item in the list. We want the selected item to replace the text in the text field in our content view that was tapped on, and this will require a binding to that text. So we'll create a binding string and call it PickerField. This view will also have to be presented somehow and dismissed, and this will require another binding to a Boolean, so we'll create one called presentPicker. Now we have all we need to complete our action when the user taps on the item in the list. First, we assign the selected item to our bound picker field. Then we set presentPicker to false, and we do that within an animation block so that it'll fade out nicely after being picked. And if we want to back out of things with a cancel, we can simply use the with animation block in our cancel button without setting the picker field. And then finally, to quash errors in our preview, we can add some contents for those 2 bindings. We're now ready to present our picker from our content view. Let's work on that first single text field first. Each text field will have to pass an array of strings to our CustomPickerView. So just for the sake of argument, let's use the same one that we had used in our CustomPickerView for testing purposes. So I'm just going to copy this array. Back in Content View, we'll define a variable called foodArray and initialize it with this array. The first thing we need to do is embed our content, including the navigation view, inside of a ZStack. We'll be presenting our picker view on top of our first main view, so it has to be placed as the last item in the ZStack. Now we only want to present it when we tap on our text field. So for this, we'll need to create a presentPickerState field that we can bind to the corresponding one that we just created in our CustomPickerView. And it will be false on initialization. With this done, we can add our CustomPickerView as the frontmost view of our Z-stack only if presentPicker is true. Now when we create our CustomPickerView, the items are our food array, and I'll pass it sorted with the picker field being food. PresentPicker is bound to the one in this view. In order to toggle this presentPicker value, we need to add an onTap gesture modifier to the text field, and the action will simply be to set the presentPicker to true. Well, if we run this now, we see it seems to work. I can tap on my food text field and the picker is presented where I can filter and select it. And it enters the selected value into the text field. If I tap on the field again, it presents the picker once more. So let's select another option. However, when I tap on the text field, I find out that it's editable. It's only if I tap in some white space does the picker present itself, and this isn't good. You may think that you could make the field disabled. However, if I do that, the tap gesture is also disabled. So it's time to think of another solution. So what we want to do is remove the tap gesture and replace it with an overlay that is a button whose action does the same thing. And after that, then we can disable our text field. When you apply an overlay to a view, the original view continues to provide the layout characteristics for the resulting view. This means that whatever we use as our button will have the same dimensions as the text field. So let's just use a rectangle. And notice how it initially covers the entire text field? And that's not good. But we can fix this by setting the foreground color to clear. And the action, as I said, will be the same as our tap gesture. PresentPicker equals true. But let's wrap this within an animation block to give us a smooth transition. And now we can disable that text field as we don't want it to ever be entered. We can test this out in our preview and see that I can now tap on the field to present the picker. Let's filter, say, for sugar, and tap on it, and our picker is dismissed, and sugar is entered into the text field. And because it's disabled, the cursor is not placed in the field. No matter where I tap on the field, since our button is an overlay, we can tap anywhere. What I'd like to do is to use this now to create a reusable view. I'll Command-Shift-Click on the text view and choose Extract Subview. I'm going to give it the name CustomPickerTextView. But this presents two errors as we're now going to have to bind the two state variables to bindings in our new view. Inside CustomPickerTextView, create these bindings. One will be presentPicker, a Boolean, and the second will be a binding to our text view's binding that we'll simply call fieldString. We will also need to pass in the placeholder string for each field, as that will be different. So create another string variable called placeholder. This will require us to change our placeholder string to our placeholder variable and $food to $feed string in our view. And then when we present this new view, we'll pass in the corresponding state variables and our placeholder. We'll come back to our second field in a bit, but first, what if we want to be able to not only present a field with an array, but optionally be able to allow users to add items to the array? In the meantime, because we want to be able to reuse this custom picker in many projects, I'm going to cut out this view and create a new Swift file called CustomPickerTextView. I'll change the import to SwiftUI and paste our view in here. There may be some cases where you want to allow your users to build the list of options for the picker. Perhaps not always, so let's make this an option. This will require adding a button to our CustomPickerView that is enabled when the filter presents no matches. Then we will also need to create a function that will allow us to add new items to the array. This array itself may be an array made from properties in an array of objects, so the add functionality is not necessarily just appending the value of an array when we want to persist the change. For this reason, my approach is to pass in a function to our CustomPickerView. And for consistency's sake, I want to create a protocol that will help me to remember to add the function and know what is required if I want to implement our custom picker. So back in CustomPickerView at the top of the file, create a protocol called CustomPicker. And within that, we'll create a function called SaveUpdates that has a new item, which is a string. What I'm saying is that any view that is going to conform to the CustomPicker protocol will have to have a function called SaveUpdates that has one argument, a string with the new item argument label. The body of the function will depend on how you have to update your array. It could be as simple as appending an item, but not always. This function will only be executed when we have a new item, and we may not always want to have that ability on all of our CustomPickerTextViews. Since we want to be able to reuse this CustomPickerView over and over again, we'll keep that function in the calling view and just pass it in as an optional parameter to CustomPickerView. So in CustomPickerView, we can add an optional variable that will be defined as an optional function, and that will accept a string argument and return nothing or void. And this is what SaveUpdates function in our protocol is. So we'll give our variable the same name. All this is saying is that we may not receive a function called SaveUpdates from our calling view, and if we do, it will have a string argument and return nothing. So if SaveUpdates doesn't exist, that is, it's not optional, we can create a button on our title bar. So after the spacer on our bar, we can do that with an optional check. If let SaveUpdates equals SaveUpdates, then we can create a button, and the label will use an image of plus circle, and I'll set the frame to be a width of 44 and a height of 44. For our action, we'll check to see that we're not trying to add something that already exists. And if not, we can run the SaveUpdates function that was passed in from our content view, passing in the filter string as our argument. We then set the picker field to our filter string, and then set present picker to false within an animation block. Now, back in our content view, we want to conform to CustomPicker. This gives us the error type CustomPickerView does not conform to the protocol CustomPicker, and we'll let Xcode fix that for us, and it'll create our function for us. So let me cut this out here and move it down to the bottom of our view instead of at the top. Now I can do whatever I want to update our array. In our case, it's simple since I'm not going to persist this data to a database or a file. That's beyond the scope of this tutorial, but I hope you'll see that this is where you would do that. All we're going to do is append a new item to the array. But before I can do that, I have to change foodArray to a mutable version, so let me add an @state property wrapper. And now we can append our function with foodArray.append new item. Now the final thing we need to do is add the optional argument when we present our view if we want to display that button. If we don't include an argument and we omit it, then it will just leave the body of the SaveUpdates function empty for this field. Let's try this out. When I tap on the field, I see our picker now has an add button. Let me type in bananas, and the filter shows no match. I'll tap on the plus button and the view will disappear abruptly. We'll need to fix that. And the bananas is entered into the field. If I tap again, I see that bananas is in the list. So I need to fix two things though. The first, as I mentioned, is that our view doesn't dismiss smoothly with animation. I'm not sure why it doesn't do that, but the solution is to add a z-index with a value of 1 as a modifier when we present our custom picker view. The second issue might be subtle, but our add button is always enabled even if our filter field is empty. And if we allowed it to be enabled here, it would cause some blank entries if someone tapped on that plus button. And that's easy to fix. We'll just make it disabled if filter string is empty. Let's test one more time. And when I tap on the field, the add button is disabled, nothing happens. However, if I type in bananas, the add button is now enabled, and I see how the view has a nice dismissal. It's no longer abrupt. Okay, let's configure our second picker field. It'll be likely quite rare that you would have your array of strings typed right into your view, as we've done for our food array. Most likely your data will come from a database or a file. In the starter project for this video, I have a folder called Country Files. In this file, there's a model for a country that has as properties the name, country code, flag, and a Boolean denoting whether or not that country has an app store. All we're really interested in is the country name and the flag. There's also a JSON file that has all of the data, and I use this often in many of my projects where I want the user to be able to select a country for one reason or other. Rather than storing this information in a database, I simply load the data from a bundle and use Decodable to populate an array of countries. The store class has a static function that does this for me. For the purposes of this tutorial, I've created a class called CountryViewModel that has an observable object that when initialized populates the countries array, which is published. I also have a computed variable that provides me with an array of strings that is the country flag and the country name. And this is what I want to be able to use for my country array to pass to my custom picker view. So let's return now to our content view and create an @state object that will initialize an instance of our view model. Now, @state object is an iOS 14. If you're doing this in an iOS 13 project, this will have to be an @observed object. Now we can replace our text view with a custom picker text view, passing in the present picker, the field string of country, and the placeholder string of select a country. Now the problem is that when we tap on our custom picker field, it has no idea which array to present in our if present picker code block. Will it present the food array, or will it present the country view model's country names array? What we have to be able to do is to tell our custom picker text field what the current field is, and set it when tapped. Then in this section, we'll be able to know what values to pass to the custom picker view. For this, I'll introduce a new variable that I'll call tag, and it'll be a state variable, and we'll bind that to our custom picker text field. In content view, we can then create this as an int and initialize it with a value of 1. I'll bind this to a variable of the same name in our custom text field, but I'll wrap it in the binding property wrapper. And while we're in this file, I'm going to create another integer variable called selected tag, so that in the action for our button, we can assign selected tag to our bound version. Now that I've added these two variables here, we'll need to add them when we create our views. So back in content view, we can fix these two errors. In each case, we need to pass to our custom text field the bound tag and set an int for the selected tag. I'll use a tag of 1 for the first and 2 for the second. And now that we have this, we can do a check on our tag value and present the correct view accordingly. If tag is equal to 1, we'll present the food array as is. Else, we can present the country array. For the items, I'll pass in the country view model's country names array, and I don't need to sort them because I do that in my view model. The picker field is country, and I'll need to bind the presentPicker variable. Now, if my store class had a function for updating the countries array, I could pass in the save updates. And in that case, I would have to do a tag check on the save updates function in order to know which function to call to save those changes. It doesn't, so we don't need to do a check in this function. And remember, to get that smooth transition on dismissal, I have to set the z-index again to 1. Let's test this time on the simulator on an iPhone 11. Tapping on the first field brings up the picker for our food array as before. Tapping on the country field brings up our countries picker, and I can filter to select a country. Notice, however, unlike the fruit picker, there is no add button. There is one little problem though. The picker is too high on an iPhone 11, or indeed on any phone with a notch. So to fix that, I'll just go back to the CustomPickerView and extend the top padding on the picker VStack to 40. This should work fine for the SE and for later iPhones and iPads. Testing once more, I see that it looks better. Now the beauty of this solution is that you can simply add these two files to any SwiftUI project to implement a custom picker. So here's a checklist as to what you'll need to do to add this. In any view that you want to use a custom picker, you'll conform the view to custom picker, and this will require the addition of the save updates function. If you're not going to allow updates to your array and any of your pickers, then you can just leave the function block empty. You'll need to add a string state variable for each of your custom picker text fields. You'll also have to add a property that will provide access to the corresponding string array. You'll have to create a tag state variable that is initialized as an integer value of 1, and another state Boolean property called presentPicker. Within your content view, you'll create your CustomPickerTextViews, making sure that you assign a tag even if there's only one picker. Next, you'll have to embed your view in a z-stack, and in the frontmost or bottom view, use the ifPresentPicker block to check which view you want to present based on the tag and present your CustomPickerView. And finally, if any of your CustomPickerViews allowed updates, you can check the tag if necessary and provide a function that will add the selected string to the array. I have lots of other videos available and in the queue as well, so please check out the rest of my channel. You can also visit my website to see the apps that I have available on the App Store, and visit my GitHub page to see what I have available as public repositories. If you like what you've seen, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And ring the bell to get notified when I post new videos. I'm most active on Twitter, so please follow me there as well to find out what else I'm up to. Thanks for watching.